starting right now.
Yep.
Did you hit the button?
I did, until I hit the button. Greetings, everyone. Nate the Nerdarchy here from Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds, and we are doing world building and talking about what makes interesting homebrews. And with me, I have... Who do I have? Another nerd, perhaps.
I'm Kienata, and tonight we are not going to be telling you the right way or wrong way to homebrew, because there kind of isn't one. We're just going to be talking about things that we think are super sweet, interesting, cool ways we like to do the home brewing. That sort of fun stuff.
Good point.
Nice. Yeah, there's not a right way or a wrong way, but there are many fun ways to do these things. We shall embark upon them. And of course, we're going to be using World Anvil tonight in order to get whatever homebrewing we actually get done. I'm not saying we're going to get anything done. This is not a productive stream. This is a me running my mouth a lot stream.
This is We Miss Friday Nerdarchy After Dark.
I know.
So we're doing kind of a mashup between Nerdarchy After Dark and homebrewing. And world building.
And homebrewing. What are you talking about? Yeah.
Homebrew the world build.
We didn't get to do our Nerdarchy after yeah, we didn't get to do Nerdarchy After Dark. So tonight we're going to make the conversation with the chat. So there was already some conversation going in chat about the home brewing. Brewery. Hey, do you think dwarves are really good at home brewing?
I do, in fact, think that most of them are.
Woo! Killing it tonight.
Except the Dark Sun dwarves. Those poor Dark Sun dwarves.
There's mules, right? The mule, the half. That would be an easy thing to homebrew. Yes. Nerdarchy after dark. I would say a wrong way to homebrew. This is Brian Barfield. I would say a wrong way to homebrew is to give all your enemies plus 30 swords, which dissolve when creatures are killed.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna have to agree with you on that one.
I'm gonna go with yes.
Even though we said we weren't going to do that. Well, Kienata said he wasn't.
Yes.
I did not agree. There was no stuff signed.
Yeah, exactly. We did not sign any agreements about this. So homebrewing.
Yes.
Homebrewing. And normally we do world building tonight, so we're gonna try and keep this world building centric. So when you decide to sit down, let's take Afghania off the table for tonight. When you decide to sit down and you're like, I need to come up with it, you were snickering about something.
I'm reading chat. Go right ahead.
Oh, okay. Chat's funny. You guys are funny. You crack us up. When you sit down and you're like, okay, I need to come up with, if we could start small, I need to come up with a village. What kinds of things do you consider when you're trying to come up with a village? Just the players are going to go through it. There's literally one NPC I need them to talk to in this village. I almost don't care about the rest of the village. What kind of stuff do you go through to try and come up with that?
Well, first off, I plan on desperately trying to get them to talk to that one person, because you know they're not gonna. They're
Absolutely.
Not gonna. So I would incentivize in some way, either make a draw towards that villager, or have them be someone important, or just somebody strange that they'd probably check out. I'm working through technical things, so I'm like half listening to you. I'm sorry. Just wanted to say.
My God. Oh,
I'm being honest. I'm coming clean.
Betrayal.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, as far as a village is concerned, you can kind of I like to develop the purpose of the village, what it was there for originally. Is it one of those frontier type villages, or if it's just happened to be a hamlet that's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, ever since the new empire was formed. You can kind of go from there. So I guess it depends on what's going on in the area, because villages, we'd like to think of towns and villages like wherever we live as pretty stationary. Like nothing really bad happens that would wash that away. But if you think about it, in the age of an elf or a dwarf, Like, I'm from the U.S. The U.S. didn't exist in its current conditions. Like, the town I grew up in did not exist when the oldest elf was born. The oldest living elf was born. So when, if you think about it that way, you're talking about the Renaissance had happened. If you think about it chronologically in our time, real world stuff, if there was an elf. You know what I mean?
If there was an elf.
You getting me? Get what I'm putting down here?
I'm trying to follow you right now. I promise. It's taking a lot of energy. I'm trying to stick with it.
Focus. Does anybody in chat understand what I'm talking about?
Nobody knows what you're talking about. Sage Mackenzie said stores, who's in charge and leadership and why it's there. I tend to get very into those visceral concepts. What's going on in the town? Who lives there? What does the town do, if anything? Who is in charge? Who's in charge? Kind of like the idea of, is this a hamlet? Is this a village? Is this a tribal village or a fiefdom? What's going on in the area? Like, who lives in this area and why do they live there? So, how is the nerd collective tonight? One of us. The nerd collective is good.
Oh, hey, Ben. He's in one of my games. Yes, the Nerd Collective is going pretty strong, but possibly slightly confused. So
possibly.
I would like to go in a different direction that's a little more broad.
Little more broad.
Yeah, like when you create a campaign setting and you're homebrewing
the whole campaign setting.
So when you're building an entire campaign setting, I feel like there's certain things that if you don't include them, it can kind of set you back for developing stories in that campaign setting. So I'm going to talk about Eberron a lot, simply because they did a few things correct that I really like, at least as far as I'm concerned. One of the things I feel like they did was correct was there's probably like 10 ways to end the world in that campaign setting. There is like a whole bunch of nastiness all trying to do bad things or strange things or conquer or whatever. So you've got all these different factions that you could highlight as the main purpose or the main drive behind your campaign and what you're currently, what story you're currently trying to tell. So I think that's a big deal, is to have enough interesting things that are powerful in the world. Or basically, if you said, I know all the secrets of my world, how many ways would I want to be able to break it?
So episodic things. If you're telling an episodic story, these elements make it easy for you to attach onto something and say, what are you giggling about?
No, not giggling at all. I'm silently cackling. Nerd Doug says, how do you build a village, Nate? ? Well, it starts with several world-ending threats. And James Leslie says, OMG, I agree with Nate. Have to check if I have a fever. Well, sir, you probably don't, but... because it's totally the same thing to agree with what I just said. So
I don't agree.
You don't agree?
Okay. That is, if you're going for episodic adventure, what if you're going for open world? What if there are no big bads?
If there are no big bads, then...
there are no big bads.
Why hasn't a medium bad, a medium going towards well done bad, risen to the occasion and become the overall ruler of the world? Basically, if there's no nastiness trying to break down everything or take everything over, why not? Like, why hasn't that occurred? That's a compelling thing just in and of itself. There's got to be something interesting about it.
What if things are set on a smaller scale? What if the kinds of things that the players deal with, let's say, I just talked to someone about this, setting everything in a city, an entire campaign, an entire game in a city. I just talked to someone about this and I can't remember who it was.
You're talking about me right now. We're talking about
what if we are not? What if the end of the world problem isn't the end of the world? It's something on a much smaller scale. A thieves guild that's causing a bunch of problems. You're Spider-Man, they're going after Aunt May.
Okay.
Because when I run games, I tend to still tell stories on a much smaller scale. And when I talk about a god or divine being or something happening in the heavens, it's not the kind of thing players could really be involved in. It's something bigger than them.
Okay. So but I guess our points are similar.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the scale, you've got to have the threats to match it, and multiple ones, so that it kind of has a layer of interest to it.
Right.
Okay. So whether it's a world-ending Armageddon threat or it's, the Thieves Guild in town is the biggest bad, I'd say.
Right.
And you've got to deal with them on a daily basis or weekly basis in all of your travels throughout the city. That could be...
You're Aladdin. The guards want to get after you.
Mm-hmm. I see.
Something. Yes.
All right.
It scales. It scales. Same concept, though. Professional Pretty Orc said, if you're building any settlement in a world, no matter how big, the question you must ask is, what do they eat? That's exactly what I went after when I wrote my world building article on nerdarchy.com for dwarves. My problem with most dwarves was, what do they eat? So, yeah. What do they eat? What do they eat, Nate? What do they eat?
Dwarves, I would think they eat a lot of mushrooms, and I think they also make awesome things.
No.
Bioluminescent algae.
No. I do not accept this answer.
Bread's made out of fermented blood cakes.
Okay.
From other creatures that live underground?
We're going directly to chat. I want popular opinion here, folks. Okay. In your mind, can you imagine the thought of dwarves? They're all hanging around a massive table in the middle of a mead hall. They've all just gotten done with a full day's work, and they're sitting around and carousing and talking to each other and throwing things all over the place and getting drunk. They're drinking either mead or beer. What are they eating? Nate says they're eating mushrooms.
Yeah, why not?
I say they're eating meat off the bone and stuffing potatoes in their mouths.
Okay, is that because they have some kind of farming thing that...
Yeah, that's when I did it. When I wrote about dwarves, I was adamantly against the they grow mushrooms and this is what they eat thing.
Okay.
It just made me ill. So I looked up staple crops because the first thing you need to have, I'm not a mushroom. I like mushrooms. I don't like, what are those big ones? They're this exact same species as the little dinner, like cat mushrooms.
We're talking about
portobellos.
Oh.
Portobellos. Portobellos are disgusting to me.
The big ones?
Shiitake are delicious. Yeah, portobellos.
What about any wild ones like chicken of the woods and... King Strahd?
We have a bunch of mushrooms around here that we eat locally because we have so many wildfires. We actually go pick mushrooms after wildfires because that's the only place they grow consistently.
Wow.
Is freshly burned ground.
I didn't know wildfires were a great way to harvest some mushrooms.
Exactly. But my point is, if you're a dwarf...
You set fires.
What do you eat? No, you do not set fires. I strongly disagree with your opinion, sir.
So we're going to say that they live in a mountain and then they have sheep grazing and other things.
Yeah. And they grow oats because oats could grow at that climate and that temperature.
Okay. So you're saying they're dwarves that live in a hold, but they go out and interact with the surrounding area.
Right. Which enters into my next major super opinionated topic. Does anyone care if I'm super opinionated tonight? I'm going to be super opinionated. It's dwarves in the mountain are mountain dwarves, and dwarves living right outside the front door of the hold are hill dwarves.
No, they have to live in hills. They have to live in hills to be hill dwarves.
It does not compute, Nate. Anyway.
You have to have a certain hardiness level, strength-wise, to live in the mountains. And you gain wisdom by being outside in the sun. You do things like develop astronomy.
Actually, Brian Barfield said, wildfire? Mushroom time. That is literally what happens around here. I'm trying to remember them. The mushroom looks like a lattice work on the outside, and it's kind of teardrop shaped. I can't remember the name of the mushroom. Anyway, Morels?
Mearls, yeah.
Morels,
They're
right.
kind of weird and alien looking.
Yeah. So our farmers market around here, you buy pounds and pounds and pounds of morels there.
I'm super jealous, by the way. I'll be lucky to get shiitake oyster mushroom mix. Anyway, mushrooms aside, Nerd Doug says that they could eat cave fishers slathered in butter and garlic and herbs. Something like that.
Doug, I love you. Just so you know.
Beer, bread, ale soup, grog cake. I like you, Voltaire. Those are good suggestions.
Thurismund on Twitch said thank you. Thank you. To the Kienata said thank you. That's right. One person agrees with me. I'm winning the battle. A ram's leg. Exactly. All right. So clearly one of the things you're going to get into with world building is do what is good for you. Do what you think is awesome. If you're Nate and you think that giant crystals providing sunlight to the bowels of the Dwarven mining fortress so that they can grow deep, special, magical cave mushrooms is awesome.
Special magic.
That's what you should be doing. That's the right way to world build. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous. So I have dwarves that eat oats, and that's the right thing to be doing. And if you're world building, that's the right way to do it. You're just laughing at
I'm
me.
thinking about the Quaker Oats container with a dwarf on the front instead, with a giant horned helm instead of like the Quaker hat.
Seriously, all he needs is a bushy beard.
I want a mashup product of that. I'm telling you.
Someone with Photoshop, please grab the cover of Quaker Oats and give him a dwarf beard.
Yeah, put like one of the Lord of the Ring dwarves. That would be awesome. Be good times. Or just actually, there's regular dwarf would be great. So Mountain Dwarf, what?
Elfboy676 said mountain dwarves are just hill dwarves that have passed their rites of ascension. So really, mountain dwarves are just a prestige race of hill dwarves.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
And no, I don't build towns off of trees with soul trapped people in it and zombie mushrooms.
I think we should read the full comment, Nate.
No.
I think it's fair. If you're going to answer it, you should read the full comment first.
It saves the comments. Someone else can just read it later.
If you're Nate, Nate's upset because he made a wickedly evil character.
At worst, neutral situation.
No way, dude. No way.
They're not animated by foul magic. They're animated by magic mushrooms. It's practically not even necromancy anymore.
Voltaire said, so would races migrate to the thing they need? Early human settlements, if we just look at historical reference about where did humans live in ages long ago, 10,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, typically near water. Typically they lived near water. And that's because resources tend to be more plentiful near water, and most of us need lots of water. So yeah, typically near water. So I would definitely say races would move towards resources they need.
At one time or another, I was looking into development of sustainable communities, as well as possibly an RPG commune. And one of the things that they directed you towards was, most of the land choices that you have a decent amount of forested areas, as well as a river access in some way, so that you can control how much water you have access to. And so definitely, absolutely, water is key, I think, to founding a community. Got to have some way of getting it, even if you squeeze rocks for it.
Squeeze rocks.
And Nerdarchy Doug, you were doing. If you believe in it, describe it vividly, and the environment reacts to characters in it in a reasonably rational was what you're going for. Maybe you can get away with anything for a fantasy setting.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree. Exactly. if you sell the sizzle as the GM, you can make a lot of crazy things sound totally legit. That is true.
Mm.
So another thing about world building and homebrew content that I wanted to talk about when designing campaign settings is there's a big thing like, well, do you just have the normal races that are standard, the normal species if you're doing a sci-fi thing for what is actually available, and are they the same as the standard, like across the regular prime material planes? For me, I like to change a few things about it. If I'm going to do a custom homebrew setting, I either include different races. I tend to just actually include extras or augmentations rather than strip away any of the standards. That way, if someone comes into it, they can pick a standard one and still be okay. Like if you had your heart set off on being an elf and like, well, I have killed all of the elves, you cannot be one. You're like, well, I'll be a dwarf. I've killed all of those boring dwarves. You cannot be one. And you're like, no. Yeah, so I like to, unless the campaign setting, unless I feel like the campaign setting demands that certain ones are gone, so like works the way I want it to, I keep all of them and just add things. So I'm additive rather than subtractive for as far as adding races.
And you and I have discussed a world building. I wrote a book, but I never did anything with it. And we have discussed possibly D&D-izing that, but that doesn't have elves or dwarves or anything like that. That would be a pretty tough sell.
Yeah, that's like human centric.
Yeah, it's very, very human centric. But is there a way in a setting like that you feel like you could convey? Because to me, part of the reason to have things like dwarves and elves is because they add to the setting overall. They add a level of magic and a level of intrigue, and it helps make the setting feel a little bit more alien so that I can really embrace it, really get into it and be like, yeah, there's a crazy ruins, and who could possibly have built these? Were they ancient lizard people that were, technologically advanced? Were they elves? Were they dwarves, gnomes? So when in doubt, eat your brother. Elf bait, Game of Thrones sold fine without.
They had the Children of the Forest. I mean, it's not really a playable race or anything. Oh, well, I don't know. Is it a playable race in the RPG version of Game of Thrones? I'm not sure. Anyway.
Thurismond in Twitch chat just wants to know if Nightbot's restrictions have been lifted. Nightbot should not be as mean as it was. I had a few of my... wait, no. I had moderators come into the other channel and fix things.
On your channel, perhaps.
I did not have moderators come into this one. I'm going to get a few of them over here.
Maybe it's hasn't slain anyone yet, so.
Yeah, if Nightbot harasses you tonight, let Kuvarik know and he will assist you. Anyway.
Another big thing besides the races and kind of the overall, I don't know, temperament of the world, like, do you have terrible large things that could destroy it, or is it more of like a localized, character-driven plot stuff? Like, well, I mean, we were talking about people brought up Game of Thrones, so, in Game of Thrones, you've got the overarching kind of crazy stuff, but leading up to that overarching crazy stuff that could end that section of the world, you have a lot of character-driven plots that, people die, people live throughout all these different intrigues and situations, and that is all very like personal and close up. And then you can zoom out to the more grand concepts of things.
I think a major thing that would make a human-centric campaign work, and a thing that makes a lot of campaigns work, is just a good story. I think homebrewing for me is, how do I set up the world so that when the group of players interacts with it, they feel like either they could make a home there, or there's something they want, something going on in the world they want to invest time and energy into. I want to make it so that the players feel like they belong. That's a hard one for me to describe. Like it's home. I don't know. I don't know how else to describe that.
Well, I mean, I think that has to do with the level of immersion they get out of, when you craft your character, when you do his backstory, when you do all these other things, and you start the first session, or you finish session 0, entering session 1, and you're like, yeah, this feels like I'm just a normal person interacting in the world that I consider normal, even though no matter how fantastic it is. And I think if that's achieved, then you've got a good lead into crafting a story together that doesn't have too many hiccups to it. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
I don't feel like that's got much. That's like saying you bake a pie by making one that tastes good at the end. You know what I'm saying? So, like, if everybody eats the pie and goes, "This was delicious and scrumptious,"
This was a delicious pie. You must be a pie maker.
you must be a pie maker. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a good point. It should have that feel. I think that is a good. What's it called? The mark of a good overall put together homebrew. Big stuff.
Overall, good together. Ramon says, what is the main history happening in the world? What about history? Ooh, and here's another one. A question from Sage McKenzie. How do you guys make homebrew gods? Is there anything specific? So let's hit those one at a time. Let's discuss history.
Okay.
History. I like history.
So for history, there's going to be, I think, a falling off point where most players and most non-players that the PCs meet are going to just not know anything beyond that point. So there's just going to, things have crumbled to dust. The earth has turned over. Earthquakes have swallowed up old ruins. There's a certain point where you just don't know what's going on beyond that very easily. So I would say I'd be the major cutoff, I think, for what I would consider history I've got to worry about for the most part. And because by then things have either been dealt with or fallen away, or the magic is broken, or they've ended the world. So you wouldn't have to worry about it because it wasn't that big of a problem. So I would start there as like a cap for the end, and then say what are some major events that might have contributed to the current state of what is. Or you can say, how do I inform what's going on in the present about those different events, and if they really matter? And I think that's gonna come out over time as you have different players go through different campaigns, and what questions their player characters have, what questions arise in your setting based on the questions that come from your different campaigns and games.
So when you let's say you just built a homebrew setting, and we have 8 players. They just showed up. Today is their session 0. They're talking about making characters. Do you, in your homebrew setting, how much conformity do you need from the players? So I guess, would you deliver them a primer and say this is what the world's like, so you guys have some concept before you generate characters? Or would you provide them just with some simple guidelines without really supplying them with a primer or any kind of history?
I guess it depends on what kind of game they were interested in playing. If they wanted to have a discovery kind of game, like maybe they're adrift on the astral sea and come to land on this place, so they're like far travelers. They could all be far travelers, and then you don't have to tell them anything about the place before you start. But social contract wise, talking with the actual players who are playing your game, they might want to know, well, hey, if I play a wizard, am I going to be hounded by an inquisitorial style people? If I play a cleric, are only certain cleric deities acceptable? Within the area we're starting. Those are all kind of things that things I would have liked to have known before I picked a character. Those kind of questions, I think those are things you'd want to answer for the players, just so they have an idea of what kind of game they're going to have to portray their characters in.
Right. If you're selecting, if I've created homebrew content and you're like, I'm gonna make a half-orc barbarian. I can't wait to play this guy. I wrote a backstory. I'm super excited about him. And then you show up for session 0 and you're like, hey, I made this guy, I want to play him. And I say, well, the kingdom we're starting in, everyone absolutely despises half-orcs.
Because they don't like orcs.
Right. They're going to be biased against you. They're probably not going to trade with you. You're going to get kicked out of inns. These are the kinds of things where delivering your players some kind of primer, or for me, I just stand up and give a little speech at session 0. This is what the world is like. And I add some funny voices in. Ta-da! So, and I have sparkles and paper mache. No. So what about you? What do you, how do you,
I get across major points, such as, well, this is going to be more like a classic D&D game. So I'm not going to have any like space monsters from Mars or space travel or any. We're going to be in a fantasy setting, so we're not going to be traveling too far forward in technology, but we're also not in the Stone Age. The level of magic is really important, and how magic is viewed, both from like the divine angle as well as the wizard angle or sorcerer angle. Maybe like sorcerers are a problem, but wizards aren't, because that's like classic, refined, almost scientific kind of magic, where sorcerers are just like, well, you could be a demon-blooded thing, and who knows. So we want to tell them a bit about that, and if I'm going to exclude any classes, or if I'm going to exclude, like, if it's low magic, well then, Eldritch Knight, Arcane Trickster, and some of the spellcasting classes are gonna be kind of skewed to the side. So I'd want people to know that before session 0, when I'm asking them if they want to play the game, and say, hey, do you want to play a game with me? By the way, it's low magic fantasy.
Right. When I'm in RPG sessions, when I'm setting up session 0, people have some form of preamble to work off of. And that's true for anything where you're setting up a custom experience for users. You really need to let them know what they're getting into. So
yeah,
and we have tons and tons of comments in chat. The next thing I wanted to hit on is question. This is Sage McKenzie question. How do you make homebrew gods? Is there anything specific? And we should keep this one concise because we have a lot of chat to catch up with.
Okay. So concise homebrew gods. Well, you want to decide on the number you want to have that are majors. Maybe you only have 3 major ones, and it's like the earth, darkness, and the sun. Like they're the major drawing points. So you're linking it to, the natural world, the shadow world, or, things that are obscured, or that kind of thing. And then you're saying like, knowledge and the sun and all those kind of associations. So if you just said, we're going to do a major 3, those are what I picked. And then you can dive into them, and maybe there's some lesser deities or minors, or minor ones, or demigods. And you can say, you can go the Greek route, Roman route, where like things are descended from those 3.
People are eating their children.
People could be eating children, and then they escape later, or like there could be things the gods do not like, and the deities. In stories, sometimes the deities have things on their level that they've had to deal with. And, that's why the world stinks. Well, we had to keep the Titans away, so we're using all the magic of the world to do that. So guess what? You guys don't have any magic. Sorry, wizards.
Yeah.
So there's those, maybe that's why there's no magic. So some people will be like, I want to free the Titans. I've got my taste. I'm like a magic initiate, and that's all I can get my hands on. I got a taste of what magic is like, and I want them to be freed. So that could be a part of that. So
Viat Dragon said, not a fan of human campaigns. I never liked playing humans. And I totally get that. A lot of people are like, no, if I can't play my, insert favorite playable race here, I don't want to be in it. I have a friend who, if he couldn't be a half dragon, would just have no interest whatsoever. So,
and we're humans. So, you want to play something that you can't be.
You want it to be interesting, and sometimes someone says, we're going to play a campaign and we're all going to be humans, and you're like, I'm a human every day, man, save it, I want something else. So Reese Tombson said, depending on religion, you could allow for more religious races like Azamar or Tiefling. I got I got a few people getting on me about how I say that word. Or tiefling to be more common. Let's see. Alex C, we have a lot of interesting ideas. Meteorite changed the face of the world. Lands rose from the sea swallowed the coastal cities. Fire burned most of the world. Some races are extinct. Okay, this is the Demon Warlord. I have a question on homebrew religions. Like, how there can be multiple that worship the same god, and how many religions are too many? I like that. So, is there too many? Is that a thing?
Well, when you don't have like any major ones destroy the minor ones or cults, then you have kind of like an outcropping of all these different. I mean, it's like in the fantasy world, because of the slowness that communication has for the most part. I mean, unless you've got wizards stationed in towns, like a telegraph system or phone system or whatever, things get around a lot slower than, 24-hour news cycle we have now. And even then, I mean, I don't know what's going on, all the stuff that's happening in Canada. I just don't. Because I'm not there and I'm not focused and fixated upon it. And I'm not getting news that's focused and fixated upon it. So it's very easy to consider that, hey, you thought you exterminated that cult of the dragon god that's trying to revive a dead dragon that's going to try and crush the world or whatever. But you didn't, because you missed like their NX group that's, across the mountains and had just started, and you didn't learn about them, and now they're coming back with a vengeance towards this ancestral home of this dead dragon. So you're like, okay, why were they allowed to exist? Well, because we don't have Twitter and we don't have all these other things that connect us in such a strange way. And even then, stuff slips through the cracks all over the place. So it's very easy to imagine having thousands of different ways of belief that even if a quarter of them are doing something like trying to break the world, they're either not powerful enough and not far-reaching enough, or they get crushed every once in a while, but they're still around because someone finds a book and reads it and says, I like this idea. Or
precisely,
there's stuff that's always going around. So it's really easy. I mean, your group of adventurers could find a book someplace and someone could say, I really like what this says. I think I'm going to follow this as my new maxim on what life is all about. And bam, the cult that's been dead for 1,000 years is reborn.
Exactly. So, and someone in chat did just say religions, people, cities arrive and are destroyed all the time. And you could absolutely have that happening in any homebrew campaign. So as far as creation of deities and my own stuff, there's right now games like D&D is based very much around Western fantasy. But if you explore some of the other fantasy settings, especially if you explore historical beliefs about gods and demigods and demons and different kinds of angels, goblins can be good just as easily as they can be evil, depending on what part of the world we're talking about. So if you explore some of these other things, you may come up with some much more far-reaching and impactful deity concepts for your homebrew, especially when you start gently drawing, don't really take things directly. I don't like to do that, but gently drawing on things that exist in the real world. I've had players say, man, that was an incredible idea. This deity is so cool, or this concept is so cool. And I'm like, sweet, I copied it out of this history book.
It's a 3,000-year-old deity.
Yeah, they came up with this 3,000 years ago. This is not my idea.
Still good.
So,
still works.
Still good.
Alex C, I think helped answer, what was it, Sage's question about deities and what to do. He's talking about limiting them based on domain access. So that's a good point. If you don't have a deity type for that's kind of falls in a domain category, you could exclude that domain, or you can instead say, well, there's 9 domains. I'm going to make a deity that rules over those. So you could have clerics of all those domains, and then you're like, well, I made 9. Check, I'm done. I don't need to make more. All the rest of them can be lessers or whatever. But you could also play clerics the way that they don't need necessarily a direct conduit to a a deity or some kind of avatar of something. It can be instead that like a church of one kind of mentality where they're like a living avatar for a concept.
Right.
So,
and religions don't always have to be based on an actual deity. This is another thing that sometimes I think I feel like it's missing from a lot of homebrew content. You can have the biggest kingdom in all the lands, the most opulent kingdom. They believe in a deity that doesn't exist. It could be a social construct. It could be a financial construct. There's a lot of money to be made off of it. So you can take a lot of different approaches for how you want deities and religions to work in your own homebrew setting.
It could be that the first emperor was supposed to have just stepped off of the top tower and ascended into the heavens.
Yeah.
Bam. Now his family lineage is divine from here on till whenever they get deposed or assassinated or whatever happens.
Exactly.
And that's the religion of the entire place.
Yeah. Worship the God King. That was a Dark Sun thing. Of course,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
the Dragon Kings had the ability to give their followers like tangible power.
Templars were the Warlock Pact before, there were
Warlock Pacts.
Dark Sun did it before it was cool.
Dark Sun did everything before it was cool. Here, okay. Shadow of the Colossus type being. Oh, Shadow of the Colossus. The Mighty Hob question: in the real world, religions were often regional. That's a word. But in most fantasy settings, they're more racial and independent of region. Do you think, and chat cut me off, do you think more settings should be more regionally diverse? I am an incredibly big advocate of cultural and religious diversity across regions. And I think it is, if you were to take any element and say, Kienata, what is missing from D&D? I'd be like, I want dwarves that aren't like all the other dwarves, and I don't want a new race. I just want dwarves that live in a different part of the world, so they believe in different things. They're all carpenters, and they really like trees. You know what I mean? Just like, give me a different direction. That, I would definitely say that's what I would feel like is missing. I absolutely agree.
Could they be seafaring dwarves who built ships and they love carpentry?
Yeah. All shipwrights? That would be amazing. That would be completely amazing. I would love that.
Yeah, and that would be like just culturally different dwarves that have a different set of interests that have, kind of strayed from whatever was originally a dwarf 1,000 or 2,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, so going along that, I think that's why in D&D it's kind of like the human has the major cultural ability to be different things. Do you know what I mean? Like, because you get the pluses, you got the variability and the ability to have different bonuses to different stats based on, I guess, like upbringing and environment and where they're all like dwelling and what's going on.
See, and we had a talk about this behind the scenes. So I'll present something. It's technically homebrew, right? And This is not my idea. Disclaimer, this is not Kienata's idea. Another game did this before, and I thought it was cool. Okay, what if I told you you'd like to play a dwarf? In order to play a dwarf, you have to have a minimum strength of 14 and a minimum constitution of 14. You don't get stat bonuses. No stat bonuses. You literally have to meet a requirement in order to qualify to be a dwarf. How does that play out for you? And I'll scroll all the way down to the bottom of chat here so I can see what you guys think. But it definitely lends to a trend of dwarves are like this.
Yeah, rather than I picked dwarf and I have these pluses and I could have put a 10 in both of those. Mm-hmm. Or an 8 in both of those and got 10s if I was a mountain dwarf, like strength and con. I would be the kind of like one of the weaker dwarves in the mix as far as those two things are concerned, but it could be something you do as a choice in Dungeons and Dragons. But if you were basically had to qualify for a race in Dungeons and Dragons or any type of fantasy setting, then that does lend itself to, well, it's almost as if those stats are drawing a lot of the potential you have available, and it's bound up in certain abilities. So it's going to be bound up. If all dwarfs are minimally strong at 14, well then, I mean, you can wear almost all armors at 14 strength.
Right. And this also, one of the things we're considering, something Nate pointed out, is this also develops a trend in character class.
Yes.
A wizard dwarf would be incredibly unlikely if 14 con and 14 strength are requirements just to get at the table. A dwarven cleric would be very rare because he's got to get that wisdom high enough to be able to be a good cleric, or they're just mostly bad at it. And Shield Bunny said old school D&D where you could fail out of dwarf school, was annoyingly restrictive. And I believe it was character classes in 3.5 that had stat requirements. Nate, a mighty pinnacle of knowledge, am I right?
What?
I don't remember. Was it character classes in 3.5 you had to have minimum? Was that just prestige classes? What am I remembering? Character classes?
There's all kinds of requirements for certain things for 3.5.
I'm not crazy. I knew I was right.
But I think early on there were certain requirements to be. I mean, like what was it? Second edition, you had to have a 17 charisma to be a paladin. Plus a whole bunch of other stuff, but they were awesome. So, but they were super. The thing was, they were extremely rare.
Yes.
Because if you only got one set precious 17 or 18, you're
really
like
gonna
holding it in your hand and be like, you could be anything. You could be a ridiculously high strength as a fighter. Or you could be the smartest freaking wizard in the land. Or you could be a really awesome looking paladin. That has a 10 strength or 12 strength or whatever they required. And all the they needed a lot of stuff. But anyway.
Yeah.
So that was, I would say, that can be annoyingly restrictive, but it also informs you. Like Paladin was extremely rare, not only because as a game choice, players didn't want to put their 17 in charisma, but as a statistic of like the world, you were only going to have so many people that would have a 17 to put in charisma in the first place. So that informs you about the rarity of that class. So there's not anything informing for 5th edition. There's nothing game rule set, I feel, that informs you about the rarity of anything. Except multiclassing.
And to that point, because of the fact that there isn't anything informing you, I would point out that most RPGs don't say you have to meet the bar to be able to do a thing. They just say, go ahead and do the thing. So Babakis said 3d6 straight down the line and bust. That is hardcore, sir.
I did that once back in the day, and it's hard. It can hurt. You get some interesting characters. I think that was the game I played a monk. I'm not too sure. I might be mashing one of the hundreds of so games that I've played over the years together.
Brian Barfield takes issue with what you said, sir. Paladin is still awesome. What do you mean they were awesome?
Oh. I meant for second edition. Second edition as the entire edition was in the past for me. So yes, I agree they're still awesome. But they're a lot easier to be in the later editions. So. Oh yeah, now we're getting into talks about how do you roll for the game things. You know what? Ever since 5th edition came out, I don't roll for stats. I take either the point buy or the array.
Yeah,
I've become a boring gamer.
That was one of the things that we said we really liked about 5th edition. Oh yeah,
the Love and Hate series, yes.
The Love and Hate series, which by the way, we got some hate for the Love and Hate.
That was expected. Sorry.
We figured somebody has to disagree with you or your day is super boring, right? Like if somebody doesn't disagree with me, I can't can't possibly be right about everything. There's no contrast. Things are boring.
Yeah. So in your case, you're talking about creating requirements to be certain things so that you inform the gamers, and also kind of tell them, well, how rare something is in the world, or what's the expected thing. So you're not going to be a dwarven archmage is really low in chance, or they won't be as smart as a human archmage could be because of
it
how
also
stats would work out.
It also prevents certain things from happening. In The Hobbit, the dwarves, who was it? Oh, it was the group, the fellowship. The fellowship is rolling into the elven city in the woods, and all these elves show up with bows. What did he say? I have the ears of a cat and the eyes of a hawk, or something like that.
And he's got an arrow on his face.
You see all these elves, camera pans up, you're looking at all the elves. There's not an ugly face amongst them. They basically hired an army of supermodels and were like, hold bows, right? So...
well, I mean, they're Tolkien elves, of course.
So if we want to constantly convey that, then we say when you make an elf, your minimum charisma is 12. That's normal charisma for an elf. By doing so, we prevent anyone from dump statting charisma and being an elf. If we're just using charisma as physical appearance, and we do a whole show on what does charisma mean.
Yes, we could do a 2-hour show on what does charisma mean.
Right, we could just argue about what it actually means. But if we're saying charisma is physical appearance, minimum charisma for an elf is 12. Now we've informed everyone that all the elves are Tolkien elves. They're just beautiful, lively built people. So
I see what you mean.
Oh, here we go. Here's another one. Vern. How do you guys handle a bunch of players who want to play exotic races like bird people, deep gnomes, Ganassi, Tabaxi, etc.?
You don't say Genasi? I say Genasi.
I'm willing to say it however the smallest number of people will complain about me saying it is. I will say it that way.
Whatever you like. We'll each take one, and then someone will let us know.
So, why does he say it that way, Nate? I told him it's fine. I'm sorry.
I don't even know if Genasi's right. Just saying.
Yeah. Okay, so people who want to play a bunch of exotic races.
Okay. Well, let them tell you how they're all together, because you're not doing that. I mean, what are you going to start? One in the Underdark, one in the air mountain temple of the winds or whatever, and then you're going to start the people that you could probably hash together, and say, okay, you're a weird band of mercenaries. I mean, oh, hey, you're a weird band of mercenaries. There you go. That's a good start. That would work out.
When the Fox said, I would have an elf at charisma 12, and all the other elves would just go on about how ugly they are. And I think that's a perfect example of the point I'm trying to get across. But yeah, as far as exotic races,
and you draw eyes. And you would draw eyes. Like I'm in a group playing the Mines of Pandelver. Guess what? There's not a lot of Dragonborns. There's more dragons in that area than there are Dragonborns in that area. I'm the only one. And I just fought a dragon the other night. And lost, but I fought him. So, Dragonborn as rare as certain types of monsters. So I draw eyes and I turn heads when I walk into a place. Because they're wondering if they have to fight me. And that's perfectly normal. Yeah, what is that thing? Is that a lizard man monster? Don't we kill them? Like, no, I'm a dragonborn? That's totally
I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to kill that right there. Looks like it's full of experience points.
Yeah, but could you not cook that deer leg? I'd like to eat it just how it is right now.
Exactly.
And everyone's like, oh. Yeah, so, and I think the DM does a good job of playing that up, because I'm an exotic race in that campaign. My character, I play a character that's an exotic race in that campaign, and I expected to be treated as such. I didn't be like, oh, why are they making such a big deal about this? Well, it's because you don't look like, if you're the deep gnome, it's like, you don't look like any gnome from around this part that people have heard of in stories. So
Yeah.
let alone actually seen with their own eyes. So they're a little put off by how you're completely different than any expectation they had.
And Andy M said, pretty doesn't automatically equal high charisma. And absolutely, that's what we were saying. If you were using charisma to measure physical beauty, charisma does not always. Like I said,
come back from the stat conversations. Come back from it.
I know we could do a whole show on what charisma is and isn't. I would say it depends on the games master. Because I've had people say how you're going to be reacted to is how you decide to role play with me. And your charisma is just how pretty you are. I've had other GMs say, well, it has to do with your etiquette and your ability to speak, like how good of an orator you are and all kinds of things. So yeah, there's lots of
then there's the unconscious charisma where you'd say, you see them and you automatically think certain things about them. Maybe it's the way they walk and you're like, oh, that person has a commanding presence. They haven't said a thing. They're in like commoner outfit, but they walk like they've got the walk. And you can just basically look at them for a second and know that they are whatever tier person, comparatively speaking to you. Just their magnitude, their charisma.
And we have more. I have to read the comments.
We have to get off the charisma track.
I'm going to read comments from chat because I love you guys and I want you here contributing to the conversation. But then we're off charisma. We're getting off charisma.
Yeah.
Kyle Ellis had an interesting interpretation. Charisma is a mental stat. Constitution is your physical nature. And then Xander Olilla, charisma for me is your intelligence in social life. Interesting. Okay. All right. Backing away slowly from the charisma bomb. Beep, 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 beep. Okay. So using a multitude of exotic races in most of my campaigns, when someone shows up and says, I want to be an absolutely crazy race, someone shows up and says, I want to be a centaur. I inform the player of how that may complicate their lives. Have you ever seen a ladder before? This is going to make your day really hard. And then depending on what they want to do at that point, I just let them do it. I had a player play a Lamia once. He had a lot of damage for a first level character, but it all evened out in the end. So
yeah,
I tend not to worry about stuff. Is the character interesting? Are you going to do something interesting? Are you going to role play something? Or are you just making this character because you'd like a stat boost and you want to be a killing machine? You know,
yeah, like Bang Wemmick from other editions. Like, I'm going to use 2 weapons and I get to attack with my claws. I'm looking at you, Nerdarchy Ted from 15 years ago. I'm calling him out.
I've got another question. How do you handle racial conflict tension without it getting nasty in a real world way? Typically, I go with elves don't like dwarves. Nobody likes orcs. Elves and dwarves think humans are dumb. These are your generics. And as far as how they treat each other, this is one of those many role-playing challenges you're going to run into. It's the same as approaching a variety of different topics. The racism, sexism, and a whole bunch of other things. And I think for most of us, if you rely on common sense, you'll probably be okay.
And there is also, so I've got an example in Ted's game. My character, my lawful good high elf. I'm looking at you, James Leslie. He doesn't like dwarves because almost all dwarves he's interacted with are the stereotype of what he thinks. And as far as he's concerned, the dwarves just don't jive with what he likes and his ideals. Do you know what I mean? Like his cultural, racial, whatever ideals from, however many centuries of elfenkind that he's drawing from, he comes in and he's like, all right, dwarves like these 3 things a lot. A good amount of them anyway. So I think it's safe to assume that a dwarf likes to wear like this particular type of dress, this particular armor, that they may be a smith, that they may be some kind of craftsman in some way, and that, they might cut down more trees than they like to like let sit around for the use of just being nature. So I got a problem with that. I'm a nature cleric, like there's I think elves, in my view of elves, they always have kind of a this is how you interact with the natural world, and it's not just resource management.
Yes.
Of like, oh, we've got to chop down less of these trees because if we chop down too many, there won't be any left. That's not an elfin view of what you're supposed to do with nature. So, but it might be closer to a dwarven view of what you do with nature. So that's just opposition. So Dave has a different spin on it. He thinks my character's bigoted, but I'm just like, well, show me a non-smithing / craftsman dwarf who, show me a hippie druid dwarf, and I will be friends with him. He will be my best friend in the game. My character's best friend in the game. It has nothing to do that they're short, stout, and grumpy most of the time. It has to do with the other cultural features about them that he doesn't like.
Right.
And I think that's a legit conflict to have. And also, that's another thing is if you're like, my elf does have the stereotypical view of or understanding of dwarves, and if he saw one breaking his conception of it, he'd be like, oh, this is interesting. Not, oh, that can't possibly be real. He must be a figment of my imagination or something. He would take it into his worldview, and his understanding of dwarves would grow.
Well, I definitely don't think one stream about world building is the right place to dive into a complex topic.
We'll just shove it in the charisma pile.
Right, yeah. So I would say that something to always take into account when you're looking at one of these fantasy worlds, you're talking about a world where there are hundreds of races and possibly even that many gods. Things are much more normalized. You know what I mean? Like you see an orc. That's not completely out of the ordinary, maybe, or a dwarf and an elf are in the same town as you. That's three people coming from vastly different backgrounds. I would say D&D, if anything, would be much closer to like a mixing pot.
But that's not a dwarf. That's a bearded gnome. That's I like
right,
that.
Right.
So wait, you're saying more of a mixing pot in what way? Like how many people show up? Like the common kind of grouping of a town.
Right.
Or a city?
If you see a group of people walking together in D&D, how many of those people are the same race or even the same species?
Well, if they're a group of player characters, they're all kinds of things probably.
Exactly. And that's kind of how I envision a lot of D&D worlds. Is the world is much more complex, and there's things that are like in Spelljammer we're playing right now. We could end up stopping at a bar somewhere and having a full-blown conversation with a mind flayer, a beholder, and a yogi, and it might be a completely pleasant conversation. It's fantasy. So anyway, new topic, new question. Brian Barfield on a different topic. How do you handle homebrew education? For example, a city based entirely around magic might teach their children the magic initiate feat. I thought that was kind of interesting. And I had another question, but I lost it. I'm going to go find it. Oh, here it is. Go ahead.
All right. So with the magic initiate feat, I guess the issue is if they're not humans, they can't do the variant and pick it up at the start of the game.
You're saying mechanically.
Okay, I'm saying mechanically.
He's saying,
you're saying they teach
I believe you're saying thematically.
Okay, thematically.
Everybody in the town goes to Hogwarts. Go.
Well, I would say that not everybody probably would, but a good majority of them probably think that that's like the regular schooling that you're supposed to do. And I think that could be cool to flavor something like that way, like have a maybe
this is your public education system.
Yeah, maybe they're normally maybe they have a lot of backgrounds for sages. You know, maybe a high quantity of characters that come from that city will have sage background. I think is a good way to go with it. But as a magic initiate, maybe I don't know. The mechanics are getting in the way for me. I'm sorry. It
Mhm.
sounds really cool. I like the idea, but I'm trying to talk. I'm thinking about how it would all balance out with how everybody starts at where they start, and that's an issue.
Well, I have two questions from chat I want to ask. But before we hit those questions, I would say, for me personally, world building, if I don't like a rule or I don't like how something works in the game, I change it.
Shocking.
Yeah, it's seriously, if that was my setting and everyone in this town goes and learns magic initiate, then that's how it works. Congratulations, here are the new rules. Here's your primer. So okay, so first question. Dragon, Viat Dragon, how do you deal with making custom races? Say a player has a concept in mind and none of the races fit. And this is within reason, they stipulate. Within reason. You're not going to go, do something crazy, but within reason.
Okay, well, there's all the half-elf races that you could have. I mean, all the half-elves that you could have. The different elven races. You would have, a half wood elf. What does that look like? Well, I don't think it's much more different than a regular half elf. It's just the half elf rules, I feel like, built in to selecting certain skills, certain language, and certain stat bumps that I think add a nice mix to, well, if it is, I'm trying to remember what they get. They get a lot of stuff. Half elves are really good.
Yes.
I just remember it being very good. I don't have any half elf characters. But
winner of the mechanics battle.
Yeah,
I think everyone's human right now, right?
So if you were going to play a half wood elf, well, I would pick wisdom as one of my stat bumps because of the wood elf bump to wisdom. So that maybe you're like more wise than an average elf, like maybe from a high elf or another type. So you can kind of bend it that way. But then you can also just, use a lot of descriptors as well as what skills you pick. Like you'll pick probably survival, maybe. That could be a thing to pick as a half elf, but that's not mechanically different. That's just, I'm saying, using the current rules to shuffle your half elf towards a half wood elf. But if you're trying to make just a completely different race because someone wants to do something, I would say reskin it at first. Two people played goblins in Nerdarchy Dave's campaign before there were goblins as a 5e race that you could playable goblins as a 5e race. He just had them be reskinned halflings. Because in the end, how much of a deal breaker is the mechanics of something if you're just saying, well, I'm going to act like a goblin, fight like however, describe myself, all that kind of stuff. If that's all going to be pushed towards goblinoid, believable goblinoid interactions, then as far as everyone else is concerned, it doesn't matter that you are also a lucky goblin. You have these other things, and you can also look at there's enough of them out there that I think you can look at something and just say, well, what would I change that would allow you to have that different flavor and then reskin something. So there's enough there's enough stat bumps to different things from different races that are pretty much balanced that you can start with one of those as a base and slowly inch it towards the directions you need.
Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with literally whipping things up on the fly, especially if you feel like it's going to help your player. If your player is going to enjoy participating and going to have a really good time, and you don't see this as something that's going to wildly imbalance the game for everyone else at the table or impact the fun they're having, throw something together for them. Why not? Crack open the monster manual. Let's see. You bite like a wolf and you claw like a tiger and you get more run speed. How about some night vision? Okay, you're done. Clunk. There's no reason with just not throwing something together. Babacus on Twitch said, what are the different challenges between designing each kind of campaign? That is a broad question, but we could hit some of that.
But it goes back to campaigns. We kind of dived into all the different little bits of a campaign setting.
There's so many bits to dive in with a campaign setting. That's how the world building stream basically ends up as a Nerdarchy After Dark, because we've got 10 episodes worth of philosophy to go through here. So,
So,
challenges
yes, challenges.
in world building,
In
difficult
world building,
things.
difficult things and challenges in world building. Feeling like you've either done too little or that you're doing too much and thinking that you need to do more, I think are major challenges, because you run into this issue where it's like running an adventure. Like, how much do you plan? How much do you work through? And we did talk about that when we did pros and cons. I think did we do that last Sunday? We talked about pros and cons of different ways of running a game. And one of the things was that if you just do it off the cuff, you have issues with, not having a kind of crafted
I walk
scenario.
off the path. What happens?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, if it's off the cuff, then, you walked off the path, that's good, because I didn't have anything for forward anyway. So it's just as fluid as whatever. You could turn around and stab somebody in the back over there, and we'll still be able to go forward, because it's not like all set in stone what I've got planned. So there's different styles. So it's kind of like, well, what style of running do you want to do for your campaign? And that'll kind of inform how much prep you need to do and what kind of things you're going to figure out. So, but I'd say major things for a campaign is, the size and scope. So you were saying that you were talking about doing a full cities campaign where it all takes part in a city, and they don't really have to leave for any reason, because all the stuff kind of knits back together.
For proper attribution, that was someone else's idea, and they were talking to me about it, and I don't remember who it was. But go ahead.
A city campaign.
Yes.
It's been around for a while. People have done it.
Well, someone else was talking to me.
But
we had a conversation about it.
And then you could have the kind of like saving the world because something's trying to end it. And if you go with a broad brush for your campaign and you're just designing those elements, design powerhouses that could in fact do something that might end the world, or not end it, but change it. Like, well, apocalypse can be just a transformation of everything there into something new. It doesn't have to be a terrible apocalypse. It can be a transformation. So, but the transformation might not be wanted by 90% of the populace. So to them, it is like a terrible apocalypse. So if you have those like 5 to 10 ways of doing real, not damage, but real transformation or change in the world for good or ill, then that's going to lend you to kind of like jumpstart different ideas. And then you can decide whether or not you're diving down to the microscope of, well, we're in a town and we're going to just basically do things around the town, and have those things happening in the background. So when they get higher levels, it's less believable that dragon that they have to deal with was sleeping underneath the town just happens to have awoken when they're powerful enough to defeat it.
Hey, Batman never runs out of stuff to do. Neither does Spider-Man or Superman. Those dudes have been busy for decades.
Yes, that is true.
Yeah, exactly.
So, well, and to a certain point, there is a believability. I mean, they're in cities, fantasy cities as well. So all kinds of crazy stuff can happen in a city. So that is a good point. You can never run out of stuff to really do in a city. But there might be a certain point where the scope or the power and level of your characters goes over what you feel comfortable with doing with the region. And that's where you can like latch onto one of those large ideas and tie it in some way to what's going on with that group, or draw them in. You
absolutely want that big bad. I never do the crazy big bad. I'll be totally honest. My big bads are more like little bads.
My Hold of the Mordanes campaign, I have two major things. One of them is I'm expecting by 14th level for them to deal with the threat I had planned. So I have stuff that I hope you're not in that campaign. That has affected them currently. They're at 5th level. Stuff that has affected them currently. They have not even met this person. They have met his machinations and things.
My machinations.
So, as far as they know, there's a different adventure every week for all the stuff that they're doing, and they're currently hanging out in a city, and they've hung out in the city for a few weeks, and they just went carousing, and somehow carousing was a 4-hour session. So, hey, whatever. A lot of crazy stuff happened. It was a lot of fun, I thought. But anyway, by 14th level, I'm going to have them meet this medium bad, and they're going to kind of tie up all those plots, I think. But then there's another thing going on in the world that they're going to stumble upon that they're going to require to be higher level to deal with. Well, I would think they're going to be required higher level to deal with. But there's all this stuff happening in between. There's a lot of things. I mean, if I told them, hey, this is the person you're going to meet, this is all of his stats and abilities, and if I told them that session 1, well, it could be kind of strange. But by the time they actually meet him...
confused. We're all dead.
He's we're all dead. Yeah, he's telling them we're going to kill us. Yeah, but by the time they get to him, I don't think he's going to seem this larger than life evil thing. But again, I don't like introducing the big bad to people early on. I like them to deal with minions and other things that I don't like the idea of the guy showing up and throwing him around like anime style and then leaving. It's never been my thing.
Thurismund in Twitch chat said no Vecnas.
There is no Vecna in my campaign.
From my perspective, I would also add a qualifier to this. In most of my campaigns, I rewrite a ton of stuff so that the power level, you do gain power level, but compared to a normal D&D character, you kind of tap out at about 15 and you usually start at about 3. You still go through all the levels, but it's kind of a different, usually it's a very different setting. And the kinds of peoples that you the kind of people that you would run into typically are going to be a very different. You might run into a man who is well known as a crime boss because he's done really horrible things to people that stand up to him. And the real issue is, how do we deal with him with all of his political connections in the local area? Because, you know, politically, he's untouchable. Like the king's like, no, I like that guy. He makes me lots of money. When I have a bad season and can't collect taxes, this guy sends out his thugs and I get all my taxes. You know what I mean? Like, so it's very different power scaling, I think, between, or power scaling? I don't know. Scope. Scope is a good word. Scope is your friend. It's a different scope.
Okay.
And a good mouthwash. All right, I'm done.
So I hope we answered a bit of your question.
Yeah, we went crazy. My thing to answer that question more directly, my most challenging thing as far as developing a homebrew campaign. Attachment. When you design a game and you sit down and play it with people the first time, if you've never done it before, you should definitely give it a swing, because the hardest thing to do is to shut up and listen. Every time someone says, well, this rule doesn't work the way I think it does, or why is this work this way? It's stupid. Even if they just told you the wrong thing, they misinterpreted it, you have to be smart enough to know that means I wrote the rule wrong because he misinterpreted or she misinterpreted how the rule is meant to be read. It's not, you're not there to argue with that person whether it was done right or not. For me, in world settings, I get really attached, and then I sometimes with players, I need to shut up and listen. And when they say, we're going to do this crazy thing and destroy 10 pages of your writing, I have to shut up and listen and be like, that sucks.
Oh, yeah. I would say part of homebrewing campaign settings is, if you want it to be super interesting, don't write the future. Write possibilities of things that could happen, right, based on what your players do or do not do. Mm-hmm. Don't write the future, because your players, if you let them, they can really surprise you and write a really fantastic or strange story that you might not have envisioned, but is still like, it's more fun than them going through the novel that is your campaign. Yeah. So that's what I would say, that if you do write into the future for your campaign, or you're like, this is how I want this all to go down. Well, if you're writing a book, that's great. But if you're writing a cooperative story thing with the players, then that's going to have to develop differently. Like I had said, that I had planned certain things to happen at 14th and 20th level or whatever. But my players are also always throwing me through loops with things, and they might...
This is what players do.
They might find out who this person is, and they might meet him by 12th level. And if they deal with him, then they deal with him then. or they might never find out where he is and he gets away and he leaves. I don't know. I'm not really sure. I have an idea of what I'm planning out, but that's just simply so I have some kind of benchmark to aim for. But my players might use their characters to throw me off my aim and throw me off my game towards something else.
I think Elfbait summed it up quite nicely. And this is absolutely my conundrum. I always have to fight to not vomit lore all over my players. My problem is that when I play, I tend to go, I made an open world. Go. Do whatever you want. I have built everything in a 1,000-mile radius. Dive in. The kickback, the challenging part for me is sometimes something I built that I'm convinced people are going to think is beautiful or interesting or intriguing. They will go to that thing and be there for 2 minutes and be like, that's cool, and then leave. And I'm like, no, but there's so much there. And I really can't do that.
Back the first layer. Open the door. Just open the door.
Just open the door. Exactly. That's the hard part about world building for me. Just please play with that a little bit more, guys.
James Leslie, write the past and right up to the current. Don't go beyond because you will cry. Because they'll break all of your precious darlings. Elfbait comment, I always have to fight to not... Oh, you already read that. I liked it so much I wanted to read it again. Well, anyway, I agree. That's something that... What's that? Writers talk it info dumping. Mm-hmm. And there's a funny YouTube channel I'm trying to remember. It does sketches and stuff like that. But basically, a guy asks about who lives in that castle right now. And the innkeeper just goes in, well, back in 1,000 years ago when area was first settled, blah, 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 blah. And then like an hour later, it's just like still 500 years in the past. And the guy just wants to know who the heck is the lord of this castle that lives there.
What is his name? Can you just say his name and then stop talking?
What's his name? What does he look like? That's all I want to know. Yeah. So, and that's in writing, I think that's called info dumping. And there's this thing called show don't tell.
There we go. Cool spaceship said bad writing advice.
Oh, bad writing advice. Yeah, the show don't tell, where they interact with something and you're describing what they're interacting with, and that's informing them about different things about the world that they pick up. So when I've got a lot of history written and things written about my world, but I do not release those to the wild until the players ask to do something that links to that.
Release it. Go, be free. Woo!
I have a person who's a bard. He's a storyteller, and he's also a cleric. And one of the things he loves to do is visit libraries in the area. Anytime he gets access, he just got access to kind of like the low rated books of the lord of a city. And he's like, great, what kind of things do I find? And I'm going to look for this, and this, but tell me if anything interesting pops up. So I'm like, oh, tell you if something interesting pops up. Of course I will. So I did, and I told him about 10 different books, 5 of which he had been looking for. And one was a surprise that I know he would want, but he didn't ask for it from his character background. And I gave him 4 books that informed him about the world or informed him about topics he might be interested in but didn't ask about. And that allows me, I was like, oh, I open up the front cover and kind of like read the first few pages of it. So I tell him a couple of things about what the topic of that book is about. And then he can decide like, oh, I'd like to learn this lore more and I'll acquire this book, or I'm just going to set it back and not ask him about it. So in each case, that session, it was only like a half-hour part of the session, but they learned things about the first town they were in and people in that town. They learned things about the current status of the lord of the house, as well as things about the region that they needed to know. And I was waiting for a way to tell them about it. And that all kind of like came together in that spot to tell them about that. So I basically kind of like I made a sandwich of the encounter of the different things that I wanted to inform them about while not info dumping on them because they were in a library looking for particular information. Delicious.
Good information sandwich. John Fitzpatrick said, Nate, I know you wanted me to explore the house, but I wanted backup. Um, Brian Barfield said, and sometimes the player Barfield, did I say that right? Yeah. Brian Barfield said, and sometimes the players just want to buy a boat and sail away. Sometimes they don't care about the bad guy. They just want to go find Atlantis. And I've literally had that happen in my campaigns. I had all the players start in a port town. They pooled all their money in the inn after the everyone meets each other scene. Just don't know each other at all. The players are like vying against me. They pull their money, buy a boat or charter a boat and leave. And I'm like, I need 5 minutes. Give me 5 minutes. I have no idea what to do now.
You owe me 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. And then, Nightbot is so mean to people in chat right now. And then Winnie the Fox said, stay a while and listen from, what was that, Diablo 2.
Yes.
Mm.
Oh, Diablo. Was that Diablo 2 or Diablo? It's fine now.
The original Diablo, was it the original and not I think he said it in both games. You'd go up to this guy to get your magic items identified, and you really did not give two poopies about what he had to say. He just wanted to know if you got a cool magic item, and he'd be like, stay a while and listen.
No, just tell me if this is awesome or not.
No, is this good or not?
Or am I going to sell it to you for some amount of money that I didn't know you had?
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So Deckard Cain. Yeah, Deckard Cain, he would tell you stories. And I do occasionally build in the information dumps, but typically the way I put in an information dump is a tasty tidbit that will make the group want to know, well, would you like to know more? Are you doing your part? We're killing bugs. Are you? So yeah. Little things that will grip the players and make them go, man, we need to find out more about this. So
yeah, you've got to basically take your loaf of bread and break it into a whole bunch of little breadcrumbs and then just kind of scatter them about. So your campaign setting needs to get broken up into bite-sized pieces that people can deal with. And that's how I would distribute the information. Like they go someplace, they discover some information, and I like to add in a little bit extra that they don't know if it's important information or not. It could just be something, oh, Nate just threw in another thing that's a give me a whatever.
Local legends.
God,
I love those. Oh, man.
Yeah, so local legends that are partially true or slightly true.
Yes.
Or very misleading. I like those too.
I had a local legend. So orc that has been kicked out of his tribe is living on the outskirts of town. Somebody shows up and they're mauled and dead, and the orc is the person who brought them into town and is like, I don't know what happened. This person's dead, and the orc is like covered in gore. And so everybody freaks out. The townsfolk are basically about to hang this guy when the players show up. They hear the story, and now the players have to decide. They hear kind of basically the townsfolk's version of the story and not really the orc side of the story. The players have to decide, are they going to help the orc? So the orc's free because most of the time the players end up, I would say, doing the right thing, but following their own moral prerogative. The orc ends up free, but then people keep coming up dead. And so in the game I ran it in, the players actually went and killed the orc and then found out it was something else, a werewolf on the loose. But they decided that orc had to be the one, so they went and murderated him into pieces.
Was he not the werewolf?
No. Just one of the townsfolk was a werewolf. Yeah, my players, typically when I end up with a group of players, they go butcher first. They're like, if we stab everything with swords,
the stuff that yells will be mimics. Everything else will just have a stab mark in it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Problem solved.
Anyway, if you've played it, yeah.
Get into a little bit of Diablo love. Those were good
Diablo
games.
love. I loved Diablo. My
Yes.
favorite thing about it was I know we are not supposed to be talking about
I'm
that.
going to answer a comment from Twitch. Thank you very much. Thurismund.
Before we do that, we have a super chat.
Oh, we do.
Yep. James Leslie, super chat for $10. Thank you very much, sir. Love the topic, but you look tired. Have a coffee on me, guys.
Well, thank you very much, James Leslie. And we're always tired. But we're really still super excited to talk about this stuff.
Exactly.
It's been it's what? Start at 9 p.m. for me, and we end at 11.
Mm-hmm.
And as time passes, I somehow get tired like an old person when it comes time around 10 or 11 o'clock. Especially with I've got 5 children, and they tend to be kind of noisy. And lately, 2 of them have been keeping me up. So
the brood.
Yes,
the brood.
I think I may go out, stay up a little bit later, and go get a coffee. Thank you very much, sir.
So, John Fitzpatrick said, "Yeah, I think that coffee should go to me."
Oh, John came over and helped me with some electrical work, so super awesome.
Serge V Dog said, "It's dangerous to go alone. Take this." And instead of the sword, hand you a lore book. I think my players would be like, "I use it for the campfire. What do we want to do with this?"
Yeah.
Oh, here's another great question. This is a question. Kienata has a question for you, Nate.
Okay, sure.
Reading and writing.
Okay.
In my settings, most people are illiterate.
So most people could speak the language but can't read or write.
Correct. And you get this bonus language, that bonus language? Nope.
So I think having difficulty communicating is a novelty that wears off quickly amongst party members. So I like at least the party members to have commonality in languages, so that a few of them can speak the different languages. And also the amount of people that can speak multiple languages, was that polyglot or something? I forget. Anyway, I understand that if you're going with a fantasy setting, not everyone had books, so books were really rare or expensive because you don't have photocopying and other things like that. And printing presses, you have this situation. I've said photocopying. Printing presses.
Photocopying.
Yeah.
You have photocopying in Nate's realm.
Yeah. Well, photocopying would. Yeah, exactly. It would be an inefficient way of printing books. It depends on the time frame. What am I saying?
You got stuff for coffee. You need to go get that.
I need to just go get. I'll just be back in a few minutes. Yeah. So.
Go ahead.
I understand the desire to make people illiterate and only be able to speak the languages.
It's not a desire. I do it.
Okay, I understand my own desire to have that happen, but I dislike how kind of awkward certain things get to be. And again, it's like that language barrier. Like if I want people to not be able to read something, I'll just put it in a strange language they don't know. Do you know what I mean? And yes, you run the risk of one of the characters in my campaign has like 6 or 7 of those suckers, and he's picking up another one. And I'm like, well, it's got to really be out there, or it's going to be a cool thing that character knows and is able to interact with, and then he is a asset to the party for being able to interact with it. But if you've got like one literate character because they're a sage or whatever, and the rest of them are like folk hero and things, and they're illiterate, then, well, I mean, I guess if you just remember to do things like tavern signs or just pictures, pictograph stuff, like all that kind of stuff as the way of being around it. So I say do what you want with it.
My players are typically informed of the setting, and I love to get to ask the question when everyone comes into, the posting board or whatever, and go, okay, who can read? I get endless joy from that. All right, I have 2 good questions.
But first, I'm going back to something that we kept skipping. So Thurismund, I'm sorry, I'm killing your name probably. back the idea that local legends aren't always a legend. That is a really cool story element that I like, because it's like a teaser. Because then they don't know what's true, which one's true, which one's not. So the legend about the dragon sleeping beneath the swamp, well, that might just be a legend. But when you go into the swamp, you're always left wondering, ever since that werewolf legend actually turned out to be really a werewolf.
Yeah. Okay, we had a cool comment. Winnie the Fox said, spend a ton of time writing out the lore of your world. Expect players to read it when one player hands you a book and goes, this is my character's background, to read it. And I know I shouldn't be laughing about that. It's not nice. But I have had players, especially when I, like for instance, I have players sign up online before they go to a convention or something like that, and I receive a 19-page backstory for one of the players. Can I use this character? And and it's
is there an abstract for this? Can I get a summary, a one-page summary, please?
Really good footnotes version. Okay, questions. We had cool questions. Aaron Parks question: would you allow a party to come up with their own unique language? And if so, how do you go about it? That's a cool question.
I would say if everybody just kind of said, we're going to have these hand signs mean this. So I guess if it's like a shorthand or like really not very evolved type of linguistics, like, oh, when I say this phrase, it means something's bad or something's about to happen. So if you're in a situation and you're like, what was it? The new Sherlock Holmes, they had, Vatican cameos or something? It basically was all dead people, so that means something bad was going to happen.
Right.
So when someone said that, it was the emergency alarm phrase, but it wasn't to anybody else. They'd be like, what cameos?
Okay, I have other questions. One question, Sage McKenzie directed a question right at me. Question, so would magic be a totally different language for you? Yes. Absolutely, magic would be its own thing. Donovan Andrews, question, how many races do you include in a homebrew and what is the technology level? I like to, in my own stuff, I like to split technology up. So there are parts of the world that are still Bronze Age, parts of the world that are literally right on the cusp of gunpowder, but they're not actually at gunpowder because, spells. I wrote a whole thing about why you wouldn't need as much scientific progression if people could shoot lightning bolts. Anyway, so I go from kind of a mixture of Bronze Age and some primal tribes to all the way up to later eras. What about you?
I have some things that basically, if you have scarce resources in an area, or if you don't have a lot of trade going on, you tend to be kind of like backwoods or not up to the current technology level. And then I'll have like cutting edge stuff that's happening in alchemical labs and other things in different little pockets. Like maybe there's a guy in a tower in the woods that's doing something crazy. And an experiment got loose and everyone's got to deal with it. Or, basically they're like campaign, they're like adventure starters. Or they might visit a mage's tower in a major city. And that has a completely different level of normal magic-wise than the surrounding area. And so it'll be like higher level magic tech. They've got magic doing more mundane things than you would see. Be like if you did it futuristic where it was robots instead of magic. It would be like, well, you're unseen. You've got your unseen servants or your cyber maids. Like that kind of thing. So in either of those settings, you have where the technology is at an apex or where magic is heading towards an apex. You have these increase in general standard of living based on access to that.
We have a completely opinion-based question.
Sure.
These are opinions. Opinions are not right or wrong. They're just opinions. Here's our opinion-based question. Best setting: steampunk, Magipunk, Grimdark, High Magic, Low Magic, or Nautical, etc. Pick a setting. What's your best setting?
Out
Your
of that
camera
list?
wigging out super hard.
Yeah, I know. I fixed it.
Okay, go ahead. Favorite
Um,
setting?
my favorite setting out of that,
Yeah.
I really just like high magic. I like almost Final Fantasy Magitech levels of magic.
Oh yeah, but see, you're starting to get when you go that high magic, you're starting to get into kind of
Like
a
magic,
magic
the magic
punk.
version of steampunk.
Yeah. Yes. Well, that's don't
Arcana
you
punk.
go. Yeah, exactly. Something like that. Steampunk is my favorite.
Okay, I like high fantasy, high magic. How
High
about that?
fantasy, high magic.
So
Oh.
we're like at the like riding the wave of awesome of the the high fantasy as well as the high magic.
I want to play a dragon with robot wings and a jetpack. I don't need both, but I want them.
But I want them. Got to turn on the afterburners when you need to get away. It's like the version of Expeditious Retreat. Just built into a power pack instead of a magic spell.
Final Fantasy 9 or Final Fantasy 7?
Oh,
Style. Final Fantasy 7, the first time I played that game and I dealt with one of the guards that comes up on their magical like mech thing. Oh my God. I started weeping. It was so beautiful.
I don't know. I'm kind of torn. I'm gonna have to say 7 for right now. I think I played 7 more.
7. Well, we're old. That's why.
What?
it's the reason. Winnie the Fox said Final Fantasy 6. James Leslie said Final Fantasy 6 SNES 3. Is that the one with the train and the girl that turns into like the white looking? She's like ivory white mutant. And then they're taking all of the creatures from the magical realm and they're sucking all the magical energy out of them. God, I love that. That was like super. It taps into the dark crystal where they're like, Master, have some pure gelfling. They're like sucking all the energy out of stuff. That's the one. Okay, cool. Yeah.
I would say more 7. But yeah, 6 is also good.
Xandar Olilla has a question. I'm a DM for a group is severely underleveled for Red Dragon, yet is seriously considering taking it on. How do I fix this? This is one of the exercises I go through when I do my session 0 with players. I have 2 exercises I go through. One's a 12-foot electric fence. The other one, and I think I've said this before in streams, and the other one is there's a fork in your 10 by 10 corridor. The tunnel to the left leads to the right. The tunnel to the left leads to the light. The tunnel to the right leads to a dragon. Now, the characters that everyone gets to play are themselves sitting at the table with hands full of dice and Cheetos. Are you, as normal people, going to go rolling towards that dragon? Most of them are like, no, that's idiotic. We leave. Making it so that players have a good sense of context and power level. It's the just because I put it there doesn't mean you can kill it. It doesn't mean you should insert spear for XP. Sometimes things exist just because they're part of the world. So, yeah.
Donovan Andrews, dragon in a treasure chest, anyone? Yes, the dragon in the treasure chest story. No, but yeah, I would agree that if you give them enough context, hopefully they'll make the decision that lets them live.
Dalton T500 on Twitch chat has another solution for you. Let it smash their face in and Deus Ex Machina them back to life. Then ask them, what did we learn? So there's a lot of ways you could go about it. I would do everything I could to discourage the players from being slaughtered. One of the easy things you could do is just scene setting. Ooh, that was a moment of inspiration.
Okay, so I just thought this up. Rather than have the save them by some kind of other means or anything, have them beat somebody that has the ability to have them basically take part in some kind of dream sequence of events. where they can combat these something, a great evil in their mind or whatever, and it takes the shape of this red dragon. And then when you smash their dream sequence face off, they'll understand that they cannot handle something like that at this moment. And it might be symbolic, like it takes on the form of that red dragon to them, but it's really like some kind of hang up they've got, or something that they feel guilty about, or like reference different things from their past that might cause them harm psychically, or, you know, alter their mood, or just like make them angry or something like that. Something that's like gonna make it seem more like this is just a manifestation of their dream self and what they're encountering, rather than, well, you're just fighting a red dragon in your dreams.
Nate and I don't always agree on everything. One of the things we disagree on is I loathe dream sequences.
This is
absolutely hate
this
them.
is you find somebody who has the power to do such a thing, rather than say when you die it was a dream sequence. That's totally different. That is completely different.
You've just completely robbed me of the last half hour of gameplay. Going home to play Street Fighter. I'm out.
Well, no, this is the thing. You did it because they've actually either they understand more about themselves, and it has affected them in some way. So even if they win or defeat it, it would be something, maybe they gain some kind of benefit, maybe they'll gain inspiration, maybe they'll, you know, like make it some kind of mechanical benefit to whatever happened within this dream. Don't just be like, well, you woke up and nothing was wrong.
I got it. I got a much better solution, mostly because it doesn't involve a dream sequence. If there's an NPC in the game that the players are attached to, that they know is a powerful person, maybe someone they've had dealings with in the past that is without a doubt super strong, super tough, whatever, have that person go die trying to fight the red dragon. If that super tough, super boss, you know, this chick who's the general of some army or something, and she goes in there and she dies, maybe they'll be like, okay, if it killed her, we don't stand a chance. Yeah. So give them a little perspective, you know.
Andy M says, have the party go past the shredded smoking remains of the last party.
Yeah, exactly. Set the scene. You see on your right, which something that looks to be the body of a level 12 wizard. You're 3. That's a level. We can tell his level from that. Yes, today you can.
Cody Sams, Nate, buddy, where can I send you a camera? If you're seriously asking, Cody Sams, I've got a P.O. box for Nerdarchy. You can find it by going to nerdarchy.com, and there's a contest and sweepstakes section, and there will be a place that you send those kind of things, and that is where that address goes to.
Non-broken cameras.
Yes, I have a C615 Logitech, just to let you know where I'm at right now. And
I have a question.
I don't really feel too strongly about it. I just hate it.
This is a C620, which is a better version of his camera, and I don't even use it. That I could literally. I know.
You're so close and yet so far away.
Yeah. One of these days, I'm just gonna pack it up and mail it. Brian Barfield, he's wearing a robe of the Archmagi and a ring of 3 wishes. He's dead. What would you like to do? Sometimes it's better to set the scene if you can't seem to give the players a good sense of perspective. So show them or detail for them how bad of an idea their course of action is.
Aaron Parks, you see the smoking corpse of a fighter so high level he still has a THAC-O.
Exactly. My God.
Oh, I laughed harder than I expected. Stephen Holmes, loot the body and look for loose change.
Well, that's another important thing you could do, definitely when trying to deal with someone like that, is maybe the right thing to do is to create some form of gimme. There's an easy way to go around the dragon. There's an easy way to solve this without fighting the dragon. Maybe after they've chosen that path, you can add a little difficulty to it, but make it look super easy to begin with. So
offering of young maidens is normally the standard fare for red dragons, right?
For dragons, the only dragon that would be like, sweet, a young maiden is a green dragon, and that's because they collect people. And then probably only if she was interesting. Like, that's it.
What about eating them? They might just like the way it tastes, like veal or something.
Then you wouldn't care. You'd just be like, I like to eat younger humanoids. You just bring me any young humanoid now.
So, I'm not going to go any further into this conversation than necessary. But what I'm saying is, perhaps people taste different. I don't know. I haven't tried and I'm not going to. I'm just saying maybe a dragon's palate is sensitive enough that it can tell the difference.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so sum it up. Can you remember everything we talked about tonight? I can't because I was just talking to Chad. Do this, Nate. I believe in you.
Okay, so what we talked about was we started with interesting campaign settings and homebrews. And we ended with how red dragons can taste the difference between young boys and young maidens, and that's why you can only give them young maidens. The end.
Bo Bauman has a random question. In D&D, is there a hard stat cap? 20 is the soft one. Some stuff can bypass it. Is there a hard cap?
20 is pretty sturdy. I would say it's like it's tough because a lot of things that give you pluses won't go above 20. So it's a pretty hard cap for most of the situations. And there's not a lot of ways to get pluses to things. Strength and con. I mean, a strength con barbarian can get to 24. That's one of the only things that's going to break it. And I don't remember anything above 24. So rules as they're written currently, I would say there isn't a rule that says you cannot have anything, no matter what, above a certain thing, because they can always change the rule by having something that breaks that rule. So I would say the hard rule is 20, and there are exceptions written for that rule. And there is only really, I think, one or two exceptions for that rule. One of them being a character class benefit at 20th level out of the entire game. So I would say that's a hard cap for like 99% of the people that play the game. And then, so like that would be that's the standard, and then the exception would be. But there's no. I mean, you could. If somebody made it so you could have a 30 or a 40 or a 50.
Brian Barfield said with enough tomes you could get to possibly 30. It's a magic item that permanently adds 2 to the cap and stat. Okay. I would really hope that you would not be Monty hauling and just being like, magic items, more prizes. Like, yeah.
That's one of those things where don't you have to live through a couple thousand years to be able to get that to happen? Because isn't it like the tome you read disappears? Isn't there only a few of them in existence? So you'd have to find those 3 tomes. They'd disappear. Then you'd have to hunt them back down in 100 years or something. And you can't. Yeah, there's a cap from when, like a cooldown period to where you can use that type of tome again.
You can use the tome again every 100 years.
Yeah, so I mean, at that point, it's not really I don't consider that relevant for gameplay.
Unless your DM's like, everyone starts the game
with one of these suckers.
Can we just have the stat points, sir?
Yeah, why make this convoluted way of having the pluses and just like say, yes, you have something that overs the cap. So I mean, DM discretion, John made a good point. DM discretion, pretty much on any of that stuff. Because, I mean, even if you randomly roll, how many chances are you going to get that you're going to get one of those stat bump books?
Cool Spaceship does have a good point. Player's Handbook, page 173, the range of possible scores is from 1 to 30. I think the reason that would be listed there like that is because the Monster Manual has creatures with very high stats in
There's
it.
something with a 30. A Tarrasque is pretty high. I don't know if it has any 30s, but... So yeah, there you go. It's a pretty hard rule there. Range of possible scores from 1 to 30.
Stephen Holmes, please, sir, may I have some stat points, sir? Yeah. Bo Ballman, thank you, Nerdarchy, for looking at my comment. You made my day. There are a lot of comments between Twitch and YouTube, and I will always try and read as many of them as I can. If I missed someone's comment, I apologize. Try to do the best I can. There's a lot there.
They taste like candy to me. That's great. Winnie the Fox. I like your comment, sir.
I like it. I like your comment. We've got it. Seriously, we're going to have a discussion about your camera. We're going to have to... His camera's explodey and nonsensical.
Hey, I mean, if you set a camera to not be able to focus, not be able to auto, do whatever, and then you say, okay, computer, tell my camera to do these things, and then your camera says, what? Digital rules? What's this code thing about? I'm going to do whatever the heck I want. Maybe it's possessed. Maybe I have a magic item and I just don't know it. I shouldn't throw it away. I should wait until see if it moves on its own.
A score of 18 is the highest that a person usually reaches. Adventurers can have scores as high as 20, and monsters and divine beings can have scores as high as 30 right out of the PHB. PHB!
Well, that is going to have to wrap it up for us. It's been a lovely 2 hours with everybody. Sorry if we did not get to your comment, or we did not speak about it on air. We may have just overlooked it, or like some of you missed it for 5-10 minutes and then got back to it. But with that, let us know what you think in the comments below. While you're at it, you can like, share, subscribe, or follow. And until next time, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.